A working class icon has been vindicated, and he already has the support of Bernie Sanders. I'm talking, of course, of Lula da Silva, the former president of Brazil and former leader of the Workers' Party there. He was jailed on disputed corruption charges back in 2018, was let out of jail in late 2019, and now a Supreme Court judge has annulled the series of convictions against him, freeing him up to potentially run again, this time against neo-fascist and COVID denier Jair Bolsonaro in 2022. So he has not put his name in just yet, but he is the favorite, and as I'll get to right now, the only person polling ahead of Bolsonaro. So before I get to anything else here, this video is going to be about showing you the friendship, sort of a online friendship between Bernie Sanders and Lula da Silva, and also getting into why Lula is so popular and why this is a working class icon that people look to internationally. So first here from Dissent magazine, handed down by a lone Supreme Court justice, this ruling is momentous because Lula currently leads in the polls, just as he did in 2018 when he tried to run for president while imprisoned on flimsy corruption charges. In fact, Lula is the only potential candidate currently polling ahead of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, whose calamitous handling of the COVID-19 pandemic has raised international alarm. Recent data shows 50% of voters would either vote or consider voting for Lula, while 44% say they would not under any circumstances. Bolsonaro, the incumbent, has 38% in his corner, but is rejected by 56% of voters. So, right now, Lula, the only person polling ahead of Jair Bolsonaro, and it's really not even close. Part of the reason for this, and as I'll get into Lula's history, right now the median age in Brazil is 33, meaning that a lot of people right now that are a part of Lula's support base grew up with him, grew up under him as leader, under this prosperous time where Lula had lifted 30 million people out of poverty. So having someone right now in a neo-fascist, in Jair Bolsonaro, who is also a COVID denier, having someone this insane running the country, I mean, that on top of the fact that Lula is so loved in the country because of what he did, I mean, combines to a scenario where you have the potential here for a almost Sanders versus Trump like matchup. So more here from The Guardian. Quote, the election starts today. It's virtually impossible Lula won't be a candidate, said Thomas Truman, a Rio de Janeiro-based political observer. In American terms, it's going to be like Sanders versus Trump. The Valor Econômico, Brazil's leading financial newspaper, declared Lula is back in the game. Quote, you can be certain the left will be governing Brazil again after 2022, Lula claimed. We will vote for someone who is committed to human rights and respects them, who respects environmental protection, who respects the Amazon, who respects blacks and the indigenous. We're going to elect someone who is committed to the poor of this country. So this gives you already a little window into why Lula da Silva is so popular. And by the way, not just talk, because he actually did these things when he ran or when he led the country. Now, before I get to more of those details, let me just show you the little friendship here between Bernie Sanders and Lula. Obviously, very similar in terms of a shared worldview here. But this is Bernie's most recent tweet about this after the charges were annulled. Tweeting out, as president, Lula did incredible work to lower poverty in Brazil and to stand up for workers. It is great news that his highly suspect conviction has been annulled. This is an important victory for democracy and justice in Brazil. And Lula da Silva retweeted Bernie Sanders. It's not the first time he's recognized him, as I'll show you. But back in 2019, when Lula was released from prison, Bernie tweeted out, as president, Lula has done more than anyone to lower poverty in Brazil and to stand up for workers. I am delighted that he has been released from jail, something that should never have happened in the first place. And Lula replied to that, saying, thank you for your solidarity. You have always been my candidate for the U.S. presidency, and I hope Democrats have the wisdom to nominate a candidate with your worldview. I hope American workers will make you U.S. president. Was not to be. But you see here, two guys with very similar worldviews, care about the working class. Lula grew up in extreme poverty. I read a recent quote of him saying he hadn't eaten a piece of bread till he was 7 years old. Before that, he was just eating flour. So this is a man in Lula da Silva, grew up in extreme poverty, then worked in a union, worked his way up the union, eventually led the fight against the military dictatorship in Brazil, and ultimately, eventually, later on, became president. Now, let me show you just how popular Lula was when he left office. So this article from 2010, Brazil's Lula leaves office with an 83% approval rating. 83% approval rating. This is incredibly rare in any country. But here you have, after a magnificent run as leader in Brazil, leaving office with 83% of the country approving of him. Just absolutely incredible. And this is why. Some 30 million people moved out of poverty during the 8 years Mr. Da Silva was in power. While the country's business leaders feared his leftist rhetoric before he was elected, he soon won their enthusiastic support, extending low-cost government credit and liberalizing banking. He presided over a flourishing economy as Brazil grew on surging commodity prices. He implemented a series of redistributive policies, including significant hikes in minimum wage and a conditional cash grant to the poor. His government brought in controversial affirmative action programs for public universities that for the first time enrolled significant numbers of black and mixed-race Brazilians. Now, as I read this, first of all, I think of what Bernie Sanders could have done for the U.S. if he became president, but also the opportunity here for Joe Biden. If he were to work to get millions and millions, tens of millions out of poverty, which you can argue this recent COVID bill kind of does, at least for a year, with the child benefit, which essentially means any child you have, you get $300 a month for that child. It's sort of like a UBI. If that's extended past just a year and becomes permanent, that could really help to alleviate or lift people out of poverty. But that also, along the lines of minimum wage hikes, if Biden can do these sorts of economic policies, can implement these sorts of things, it will go a long way to not just, of course, helping people, but also politically helping Biden and the Democratic Party. But again, yes, there's a whole other discussion about where his interests actually are. The Democratic Party largely does not serve the interests of workers. They serve the interests of large donors, corporations. So there's, and of course, the GOP do as well. So there's always that, that ongoing dynamic. But just saying, apart from that, looking at the politics of it, looking at the economics, looking at how it would benefit people, if Biden took some cues from Lula, he could be a very popular president.